Hi there, and welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we are going to make a super easy and delicious gumbo right in the Ninja Foodi. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is turn the Ninja Foodi on sear saute on the high setting. And I'm just going to add in about a tablespoon or so of olive oil. I'm not measuring. You could use butter. You could also use a canola or vegetable oil, whichever you prefer or have on hand. We're gonna let this come up to temperature, and then we're gonna add in what's called the Holy Trinity, which is 1 green pepper, 2 celery stalks, and 1 large onion. I used a Vidalia onion, but you could use a regular yellow onion. That won't matter at all. I just happen to always cook with Vidalia onions for some reason. I just really love the flavor. So once this gets heated up, we will start to saute our vegetables together. That kind of creates the base flavor of the sauce. So let's go over the seasoning blend that we're going to use in this gumbo. And I will link to the exact measurements in the recipe below. So you'll see a little see more tab, open that up, and then you'll see the link to the full recipe and you'll be able to get the exact measurements of this. Now this is a double batch that I made up. So I'm only going to be using 1.5 tablespoons in this recipe. And this makes 3 tablespoons. What's in it is some basil, some onion powder, garlic powder, salt and pepper, cayenne pepper, red pepper flakes, smoked paprika, a little bit of coriander, a little bit of ground thyme, and I think that's it. But again, I will definitely link to that below. So just click open the See More tab and you'll be able to get the exact ingredients. Now you could use your own favorite Cajun seasoning in this. Just use 1.5 tablespoons. But I really encourage you to give this one a try because it is so absolutely delicious. And I use it in my other jambalaya, which I make in the Ninja Foodi too, and I will link to that recipe right up there in case you want to try that. Now jambalaya and the gumbo have a lot of the same ingredients, but the gumbo is a little bit more like a stew. And it also has an added ingredient, okra. So I'm using frozen okra because I find it easy to find at the grocery store no matter what time of the year, and it's going to work perfectly in this recipe. But you could also substitute fresh okra. You would just cut the end off and go ahead and just put them in like little 1/2-inch cuts and you'll be fine. You could use fresh or frozen, no problems at all. All right, so this should be heated up enough. So let's start to get in our vegetables. All right, so we're gonna get those in and we're gonna start to move them around. Oops, I see one little skin of the onion. Just grab that out. And we're gonna go ahead and put in the green peppers. Now these will saute. It'll probably take about 5 minutes. All right, so I was wondering why this wasn't sizzling or starting to saute. Guess what? I forgot to hit the start button. Yeah, how many times does that happen? It happens to me all the time. I'm sure it happens to you. It's called life. Whatever. Okay, so it's gonna take a few more minutes. It's okay that I threw the vegetables in. It's not the end of the world, no worries. We'll let it heat up. We'll saute these vegetables for about 5 minutes, and then we'll start to add in the rest of our ingredients, and I'm gonna talk to you about how we're gonna make the roux for this recipe. One of the things I love about the Ninja Foodi is how fast it heats up. So even though I forgot to turn it on, it did not take any time at all to heat up, and we're starting to saute our vegetables. You can see some of them are a little bit bigger than others. Not a big deal. Not gonna worry about it. They're gonna cook down. It's gonna be fine. All right, so while that's sauteing, let's go ahead and add in 1.5 tablespoons of this seasoning blend. And then I'm gonna add in about 1/2 tablespoon of minced garlic. And the reason why you add the garlic a little bit after the vegetables start to saute is because garlic can burn pretty easily and it becomes very bitter and unpleasant in your dish. So you do wanna add it a couple minutes into the saute. And this is 1/2 tablespoon again of the garlic minced. And I used my garlic press from Pampered Chef, which is fantastic. And also, if you ever need measuring spoons, I highly recommend these measuring spoons from Pampered Chef. I have several sets of them. The best thing about them is you can measure out your spices and they sit flat on the counter. And the other great feature is the way that they're designed. They go into all kinds of spice bottles. All right, so let's get this stirred around here. Oh, it's smelling so good. I love Cajun food. Of course, I love Mexican food. I love Asian food. I love American food. And I love Italian food. And I'm sure I missed some. All right, that looks great. Now, anytime you saute in the Ninja Foodi, you want to deglaze the pot if you're gonna go under pressure. And the reason being is that there could be little bits that get stuck on the bottom, and if they stay on the bottom and you don't deglaze and scrape the bottom with something like this scoop and spread or a spatula that is safe for non-stick surfaces, it can trigger the water notice because the Ninja Foodi thinks something's burning and it thinks it ran out of water. And so it triggers that water notice. So it's very important that you deglaze the bottom. And we're gonna do that with 2.5 cups of chicken stock. That'll cool down the pan right away as well. Oh, whoops. That was almost a disaster. But no use crying over spilled chicken stock, right? All right, and 1/2 cup, so that's 2.5 cups total. All right, now this is kind of like my secret ingredient, and it's root beer. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but there is a flavoring in gumbo that comes from filet powder. But filet powder isn't easy to find, so I thought that we would substitute that flavoring. And the filet powder is used a lot for thickening too, but we're gonna use our okra. Okra is going to thicken the stew, the gumbo for us. But we still need that flavor of that sassafras. Now, sassafras used to be an ingredient in root beer. It is no longer an ingredient, but there is something that is similar called anise. And so I asked my husband to pick up some root beer, and I said, get a good quality root beer. And he picked up this Virgil's root beer. And I have got to tell you, this is the best root beer I've ever tasted in my life. You can find it at Kroger, Target, Walmart, and they even have a 0 sugar, which I haven't tasted the 0 sugar ones yet, but I will. But this is fantastic. I think they've got like 4 different flavors. So it's root beer, and I think there's a cola and a cream soda and an orange soda, and I might be missing a few. But anyway, spectacular flavor in this. Highly recommend it. So if you're a root beer fan, give it a try. And we're gonna put in 1/2 cup of the root beer. So a total of 3 cups. If you wanted to skip the root beer, you could just use 3 cups of chicken stock. But really, give this root beer a try. It is absolutely fantastic. And this is not a sponsored video or anything like that. I just happen to absolutely love this root beer. All right, so there we go. Now we've got the base for our gumbo, and we're gonna add in some tomatoes. This is a 14-ounce can of fire roasted tomatoes. So we're gonna put those in and give it a stir. And then I have 14 ounces of andouille sausage that I just have cut in about 1/2 inch slices. You could cut it any which way you want. We're gonna put those in. 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken thighs, thawed, and I'm just gonna dump them in. No need to season them, nothing. They're gonna break down and become perfect in this recipe. You don't even need to trim the fat because that fat's gonna add some extra flavor. So these are boneless, skinless chicken thighs. And you could probably use boneless, skinless chicken breast if you prefer, but they're gonna tend to get a little stringier with this 12-minute total pressure cook that we're gonna do, because we're gonna do 10 minutes and then do 2 to do the rice. And I think the chicken thighs hold up better. I like the texture better, but if you did wanna put in chicken breast, you could. I would cut them in half, make sure they're not in too big of pieces so they definitely cook through, and maybe even leave them frozen. All right, let's see. Next thing is we need to get our okra in. Now the frozen okra not only adds flavor to this dish, but it also will thicken the stew. So the okra releases, I don't remember the name of it, I wish I did, but it's a little like kind of a gooey substance. If you've ever cooked with okra, you're familiar with that. And what that does is it naturally thickens our gumbo. So that's gonna work perfectly. And just stir that around. Now, the one thing that makes a good gumbo is the roux. And the roux is equal parts of a fat and flour. And usually you make a roux by sauteing it in the bottom of a pan. And for like jambalaya or gumbo, you kind of shoot towards for a dark roux. And that means that you cook it for about 20 minutes or so until it really darkens. And you can see that in my video for jambalaya because I do definitely do the long dark roux in the jambalaya. But I always like to try out new things and try out shortcuts and find out, can I do this differently and a little bit easier for you guys? And this worked perfectly. So I'm gonna take a 6" by 2" Fat Daddy-O pan, and I'm gonna put in 1/2 of a cup of oil. This is just canola oil. You could use vegetable oil. I don't really recommend using olive oil in this, but you could also use part butter, part oil. You could use bacon grease if you wanted, any type of fat that you want to use. And then 1/2 of a cup of flour, and we're gonna dump it in. I know this seems kind of weird, doesn't it? And then we're gonna just mix it together until it becomes like a paste. Now a roux is not really that great unless it's cooked. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the rack in there and we are going to pressure cook this along with the ingredients that we have in there now for our gumbo. We're gonna pressure cook it for 10 minutes. It will not darken up. It doesn't darken up, a little bit, but not a lot. But it works really well in this recipe and it is a shortcut. If you don't want to do the shortcut, then you would make the roux first before you saute the vegetables, and you can follow my recipe for the jambalaya to do that. All right, so once you get this mixed in and it's kind of like a liquidy paste. I mean, it's really liquidy at this point. It will thicken up some though. Okay, then the next thing you wanna do is cover it. And I'm gonna use this nifty, wonderful little silicone cover. I think they come like 4 in a pack. This is from Waffos. And I will link to this below in the video description as well because it is pretty fantastic and saves on using foil. But you could also use foil. And it really works. Look at that. I mean, you could just lift it right up. I'm so impressed by this. I just couldn't believe it. When I bought them, I was like, are they gonna work? Oh my goodness, they work great. All right, so let's get our rack in, and you're gonna put the rack in the high position. And I keep it on the sear saute on high while I'm getting everything together because that's gonna heat the liquid and it's gonna come to pressure quicker. I don't always recommend doing that. There are certain recipes that my recipes anyway, that I factor in the time to pressure into the total cook time. So if you preheat the liquid for those, you might run short of the total cook time and your food might not be cooked perfectly. So I advise you to, when you're following my recipes, to follow them and not preheat unless I say it's okay, because I do factor all that in. All right, so then we're gonna put that on top. And it looks like I just need to move this basket around. I think it's just, this rack, it's just not nestled on the bottom well enough. All right, perfect. So because of the design of the pressure lid that is concave, you have a little bit more room above the lip of the pot, but you don't want to interfere with any of the sealing functions in the back or, inhibit the steam from getting up, because that's what puts us under pressure. So just move it to the front a little bit and you'll be fine. All right, so we're gonna put the pressure lid on. And sometimes if you have the sear saute on and you put your pressure lid on, you will meet a little bit of resistance. And that is just because there's some heat in there and it's pushing up against the sealing valve. So you might have to push down a little bit and then turn. That's what I just had to do. All right, so now we're gonna go to pressure. and high is fine. It defaults to 10 minutes and that's what we want. So we're gonna hit the start button, make sure your valve is to the seal, and we're gonna go under pressure for 10 minutes, and then we'll do an immediate release. While this is coming up to pressure, I have 2 cups of white rice here, and I am going to get it rinsed really well so that the water comes clear, just with some plain tap water. If you like really sticky rice, you don't need to do that. But I don't like sticky rice, so I'm gonna do that. And we're gonna do pot and pot method with this, so it is less important that you rinse your rice than if you're gonna cook it in the bottom of the pot. I really recommend you rinsing rice if you're gonna cook it in the bottom of the pot, because it will tend to stick. As the starch comes out of the rice, it might get down to the bottom of the pot, and guess what that does? That triggers the water notice, because the Ninja Foodi thinks something is burning to the bottom because the little bit of starch on the bottom is sticking to it. So you don't want that. You can open up the pot and have plenty of water in there and be like, why am I getting the water notice? It's because the starch from the rice is sticking to the bottom and triggering that. So rinse your rice if you're gonna cook it in the bottom of the pot. If you're doing pot and pot, you can do it any which way you want, but I'm gonna rinse mine. All right, so we just have a few more seconds to go of the 10-minute pressure cook, and I just wanted to talk about the time to pressure. So it came up to pressure fairly quickly, probably about 6 to 7 minutes, and the red button popped up, meaning that it is under pressure. But what happened, and this does happen from time to time, is it took another 5 minutes of the little circling dots before it started the countdown. So don't worry about that. That sometimes happens, and it's not affecting anything, but it should eventually click over to the countdown. If those dots go around for a prolonged period of time, 10 minutes into pressure cooking, you might want to decrease your time a little bit, because remember, that's still cook time under pressure. So you might have to make adjustments there if you notice that. But for this recipe, it's fine. It did it the first time I made it, the second time I made it, and it did it this time. So it's written into the recipe. It's perfectly fine. Now we're going to do an immediate release. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Okay, the red button depressed. Now we can open the lid, do that away from you, because it is going to be hot and steamy. All right, and then I am going to take this cover off here. It's so funny, it's being sucked back down in there. It's so funny. I love the way pressure works. It's awesome. Okay, so now, what has happened? Like I said, it is not dark, but it is cooked. It is thicker, and it's going to do a great job of thickening our stew. And it smells good. Even though it's not that nutty flavor that you get when you develop a really dark roux, it still smells good. It does not smell like flour or anything like that. Now, I'm just going to take this out just because I want to show you the thickness so you can see what a good job this does. So it's still pretty thin in here. This would not be gumbo. This would be more like a vegetable soup. This would not be gumbo. So it's still pretty thin here. We've got plenty of liquid, so we can still go back under pressure because we need to cook the rice. So what you're gonna do is take the roux and pour it in. But do not stir after this point. You don't want it to start to combine before we get back up to pressure. So just dump it in and let it sit on top. And make sure you scrape all of it out of here. We need every little bit to thicken this. Oh, it smells good. All right, that looks good. And again, don't stir from this point on. All right, so we're gonna put back in our little rack here. Make sure it sits down, perfect. And now let's get our rice going. So the rice, I have 2 cups of rice here that I rinsed really well. And I have another 6-inch by 2-inch Fat Daddy-O pan. You could use the same one though if you don't have 2. Just go ahead and rinse that out. Or you could use any other pan that's gonna fit here on the rack in the center there. Or you could cook your rice separately. And if you wanted to cook your rice separately, because I know some people do, if you wanted to do that, what I would do at this point is just put on the sear saute function and get that roux mixed in and thicken up your gumbo to your desired thickness. All All right, so there's a couple things you can do with rice. Usually with white rice, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, which means for 2 cups of rice, we would use 2 cups of water. And I could do that if I wanted to cover it. But what I found, it's just as easy to do it this way, is just to use 1 3/4 cup of water. So pour that in. That is about the max that this 6-inch can handle. So if you needed to make more than 2 cups of rice, you would want to do it separately or use a little bit bigger of a pan. And we're just going to sit this on top. No need to cover. And that's why we're going a little bit shorter with the water, a little bit less quantity of the water, 1 3/4 cup instead of 2, is because as it steams, it's going to absorb some water, some of that steam. So it's fine to do it that way. If you wanted to cover it, you could, and then you would want to put in 2 cups of water. All right, the pot's hot, so I gotta push it down just a little bit to get it to turn. Now, what we're gonna do is go back to the high pressure. Time is gonna be 2 minutes. Hit start. After, it's gonna come up to pressure pretty quickly, and make sure you turn that valve back to seal. So it's gonna come up to pressure pretty quickly, and then we'll go 2 minutes and we'll do a 4-minute natural release. That's gonna give enough time for the rice to finish cooking and absorb all that liquid. All right, so while the pot's coming to pressure to cook our rice, I'm gonna go ahead and get the shrimp ready to go in. Because what we're gonna do is after we take out the rice, we're gonna cover it to keep it warm. We'll fluff it up and then cover it to keep it warm, and I will fold in the shrimp, and we will let the residual heat of the gumbo cook the shrimp. So what I have here is 1 pound of large. These are like medium large because they're 35 to 40 count per pound, but they're a really good size for gumbo. And they're already deveined, but they do have the shell on. So what I'm gonna do is just take the shells off. Don't throw these away though, guys. Make shrimp stock out of them. It's so fantastic. Shrimp stock adds such a great flavor to so many things. In fact, I make my shrimp scampi with it, and I will link to that recipe right up there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish peeling all these while this comes up to pressure, which really shouldn't take any time at all. All right, so the red button has depressed, meaning we are no longer under pressure. We can take off the lid, and it took a good 4 minutes to release all that pressure, which is normal for this type of a meal. It's got a lot of pressure built up. So we went under pressure for 2 minutes this time and did a 4-minute natural release. Then I released the pressure, and it took 4 minutes to release all of it. Now we can open up our lid. Again, do that away from you. Look at that rice. It is really puffed up in there. All right. Now, we want to keep our rice warm, of course, until we're ready to serve our gumbo. So what I'm going to do is just take it out here. I'm going to fluff it a little bit, and then I'm just going to put this silicone cover over top of it. And trust me, it's going to stay warm for quite some time. So I'm just going to go in here and just sort of fluff it. This rice looks absolutely perfect. It's not sticky. Oh, wow. It looks great. I think I need to put my glove on though so I can hold this pan. I don't want it to spill over. You could also transfer it into a larger bowl if you wanted. But I'm just trying to get some of the heat because there's so much heat down inside at the bottom of this rice. I don't want it to overcook while we put our shrimp in and let those cook into the gumbo. So I'm just fluffing it up. See? That's going to release some of the steam and prevent it from overcooking. Wow, that looks great though. Perfect. All right. All right, so let's just put this over top just to kind of keep in some of that heat. And I need to put both of them on to move it because it's super hot. I love these gloves too. I think I talk about these gloves almost every video because I absolutely love them. I also love my little Pampered Chef little red mitts that I use, and I can't find them. I'm so upset about that. I'm gonna have to order another pair. All right, so I'm gonna take the rack out now, and it's gonna look a little soupy, so don't worry about that because we need to stir in that roux still. Smells good though. All right, so let's get that roux stirred in, and you can already see it starting to thicken up. Wow, that is good looking stuff there. Now I'm gonna pull out one of those chicken thighs just to make sure that they're soft, shreddable, and cooked all the way, which I encourage you to do too, because of course they could be different sizes, or if they're slightly frozen, you might need to cook it longer. And if you need to do that, just go ahead and put on the sear saute and do it that way. So I'm gonna check here. This little bit of rice isn't gonna make a difference, so I'm not gonna get a new fork or anything. Oh yeah, it's breaking up fine. Look at that, it's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Nice big pieces of chicken, and they will break up a little bit more as I stir them, but that is perfect, and they are cooked through. Looks lovely, and you can see that it is thicker now, like a stew, so it's no longer really runny. That looks so good. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do is just add in our shrimp. So we're just gonna pour those in, give them a mix around, make sure that they are covered completely, and we're gonna close the lid. And in about 5 minutes, those shrimp will be cooked. There we go. And then we will get to taste in this delicious gumbo. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes, so let's just take a peek and see if the shrimp are completely cooked. And I've got to find one first. They look good to me. All right, so that is perfect. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. All right, so to serve it, I'm gonna serve it in a little bowl with some rice underneath and then put the stew on top. So let me get my rice here. The pan is still really hot, so I know the rice is hot. All right, so let's get some out here. That's enough. All right. Now, I want to make sure I get some sausage and some chicken and a shrimp in here and some of this delicious broth. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. Well, I let this cool down for just a second so I don't burn my mouth. I wanted to thank Cece. Cece sent me an email that really, I mean, it made me cry. It was so sweet of her. She was thanking me. Cece is a married woman with 2 kids. She works full time. And since getting the Ninja Foodi, she said, you know, making dinner for her family has become so much easier. And then she stumbled across my recipes, and she is now making all these delicious recipes. And they taste like she's cooked all day, but she can make them when she gets home from work. So that was super nice of her. And she asked me if I had a recipe for gumbo. So Cece, this one's for you. This is your gumbo. I cannot wait to hear how you like it. All right, let's dig in. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit of rice with the broth first. Oh my goodness, this is so good. Really, really delicious. Wow. And now a little bit of that chicken. It just melts in your mouth. I really hope that you give the boneless, skinless chicken thighs a chance in this dish instead of breast. I think you're gonna have a better overall result. All right, let's try the shrimp. Perfect. And the sausage. The shrimp are like, still like a little bit, they're not crisp. That's a weird word to use. They've got a snap. You know how when you eat a perfectly cooked shrimp, there's like this little snap? That's what they have. They are cooked absolutely perfect. Now, if you like your shrimp a little more cooked, you certainly can just put on the sear saute and cook the gumbo a little bit longer. Wow. Truly amazing. The andouille sausage in here is just absolutely perfect. Absolutely delicious. I hope you guys give this one a try. It is a winner for sure. Don't be worried about that little trick with the roux. I'm telling you, this is absolutely delicious, even though we didn't spend, 20, 30 minutes developing the roux. It was really, really good. So I want to talk about the spiciness of this. So this is a mild spice. It is not super spicy. I would say on a scale of 1 to 5, it's probably around a 2 to 3 at the most. Probably 2, 2.5 actually. So if you want it a little milder out of your spice blend, just remove either the cayenne pepper or the red pepper flakes. Just remove those, one or the other or both. If you want it spicier, go ahead and add some more in. So definitely make it as spicy or as not spicy as you like. And you know what goes perfectly with this? The Virgil's root beer, of course. Oh my goodness. That is perfect with this gumbo. You're gonna enjoy this one.